All righty. Thank you everyone for being here today for our Cash for College workshop, co-hosted with Senator Bob Wieckowski today. We're just waiting one more second for people to continue to trickle in. And I see everyone's coming into the Zoom room. All right. Well, thank you everyone for being here once again. I'm Alex Lee. I'm your state assembly member representing Northern Santa Clara County and Southern Alameda County. And thanks for coming to our Cash for College workshop just in time for that college app season. We're currently at the height of college app season, of course, coming up in November 30th. So remember that. And we want to help you get the support that you need, whether it's from the state or the federal government, to help you on your college journey, hopefully your dream school. This year, I sat on the budget committee and budget sub 2 on education finance. And this session, we were able to make long-term investments to support higher education and provide for more financial support for students. We invested $3.6 billion for the California Student Aid Commission for financial aid initiatives to help make college more affordable for everyone. There's funding for more expanded spaces at UCs and CSUs, and we've also increased support for campus basic needs centers to help students who face food and housing insecurity. Today, we'll also be going over how to start or complete your free application for federal student aid, also known as FAFSA, or your California Dream Act application. We'll also be providing grant information, answering your questions through the Q&A function. So if you do have questions, you can submit them on the bottom of your screen at the Q&A Zoom function. We are also going to be joined by Senator Bob Wieckowski, Kimberly Kim Diaz, and Israel Flores from the California Student Aid Commission, and Sonia Ramos from Cal SOAP San Jose. And I'd like to, in a second, pass it off to my California State Senator, Bob Wieckowski, who is our co-host, who represents Senate District 10, that stretches from Southern Alameda County into parts of Santa Clara County. And I also wanted to quickly note that this is actually our last official event together, Senator Wieckowski and I. And I wanted to just quickly thank Senator Wieckowski, for your leadership and all you've done for so long, especially on your lasting impact when it comes to combating debt. And you've been such a leader on climate activism. And I also want to, just a quick note that Senator Wieckowski has presided over a decade of enormous growth in our economy and so many things that we've been able to reinvest in California. And I'm going to really miss serving with him. But at the same time, he's getting off, I think, at the right time. If the economy doesn't do well the next 2 years, he'll be coming out on the high. And just like I think he's always fit to do so, he will always be a great champion for us. And I'm really glad to have inherited a lot of the progress from him and continue to build upon that. So without further ado, I'll also hand it over now to Senator Bob Wieckowski, our state senator.
Well, thank you, Assemblymember Lee, for that kind introduction. And good afternoon, everybody. As Assemblymember Lee has said, I'm Bob Wieckowski, and I represent folks here in the 10th Senate District, at least for the next 30 days, as my term will end at the end of the month. I wanted to start by thanking Assemblymember Lee for taking the lead in putting on this seminar. I'm very proud to have served with Alex for the last 2 years and have seen him take an active involvement with his constituents and champion issues of racial, gender, and economic equity. I'd also like to thank the California Student Aid Commission and the California Student Opportunity and Access Program, CalSOAP, of San Jose, for co-hosting this important webinar event. And I look forward to hearing the presentations just in a bit on Cash for College. You'll be learning about opportunities to earn free money for your future in higher education. Before we get started, I'd like to talk about another issue that Alex alluded to, is student debt and the massive impact it's having on folks. When I'm leaving office, but it's been an honor to represent the Assembly District 25 before I was in the Senate. But years ago, I introduced a bill that would require colleges and universities to reach certain performance standards to maintain their Cal Grant eligibility, just to make sure that they were not rewarding underperforming private institutions. And within a week, I had just about every private for-profit college lobbyist in my office opposing the bill. And the bill didn't succeed. It died in the assembly. But a funny thing happened. Governor Brown, in his May revise, raised the performance standards, and it raised the bar on them. And several colleges were no longer eligible to participate in the Cal Grant program. Later on, then Attorney General Kamala Harris dropped a hammer on several of the most egregious for-profit colleges who made a fortune off of students, just like you guys are going to be, burying them in debt without providing them with the skills for a job or a diploma. And the rest, I guess, is history. I also have authored legislation to bring some parity between federal and state and private student loans when it comes to how much they can garnish from a struggling student's paycheck, and have pushed for other legislation that would require students to get more educated on the loan before they sign. So we weren't always successful, but we brought together students, faculty, and advocates to push for these reforms for thousands of student borrowers just like you that are here today. So I can't tell you how happy I was when President Biden announced in August the Federal Student Debt Relief Program, which is a one-time debt relief program that will counsel student debt for low and middle income borrowers. And it provides eligible borrowers with full or partial discharge of loans of up to $20,000 for federal Pell Grant recipients and up to $10,000 for non-Pell Grants. So many of your brothers and sisters or cousins could be part of the 22 million people who've applied so far. And knock on wood, the Eighth Circuit Court will hopefully upheld the policy. So I hope that my successor will continue to work with Assemblymember Lee in leading on legislation that eases the burden for those with student debts and advocate like we are today to make quality higher education more affordable. So I'm delighted to be here. Let's learn more about Cash for College. And Alex, back to you.
Thank you so much, Senator Wieckowski. And next, I'd like to introduce Kimberly Liez, who is the Cash for College coordinator with the California Student Aid Commission. And prior to work with the commission, she worked at the California State University, Sacramento for 8 years in multiple capacities, serving students and collaborating faculty, staff, and administrators at regional partners. Take it away, Kim.
Thank you for the introduction, Assemblymember Lee and Senator Wieckowski. Hello, everyone. I'm Kim Liaz, and I'm joined by my CSAC colleagues, Israel Flores, Jenny Jang, and Jason Marti. And we will be answering your questions via the Q&A function during Sonia's presentation. We want to thank Assemblymember Lee's office for inviting CSAC to this webinar. We're elated you all are here to learn about the FAFSA, CADA, California Dream Act, and various financial aid programs to help fund your educational and career goals. Again, thank you for having us be a part of this webinar.
Thanks, Kim. And finally, our last presenter, who I'll introduce in a moment before we get into the presentations, is going to be Director Ramos. So Director Sonia Ramos, who currently serves as the Director for the California Student Opportunity and Access Program, Cal SOAP or SOAP, for San Jose, and the Federal TRIO Education Talent Search Program serving Eastside San Jose, will be giving the full presentation today. She has worked in college access at the University of California, Santa Cruz for 20 years, and Ms. Ramos is dedicated to advocating on behalf of low-income and underrepresented students to expand their post-secondary and financial aid opportunities. Dr. Ramos, please take it away. And just for the audience, just remember, if you have questions, you can put in the chat in the Q&A function, or we'll answer in the Q&A function after the presentation. So take it away, Sonia.
Thank you so much, Assemblymember Lee and Senator Wieckowski. Thank you again, and I echo Kim's sentiment in offering this opportunity to our community members, students and families who are preparing to access the financial aid or increase their awareness about the financial aid opportunities available to afford college. And thank you for all the work that you've done in setting up and opening those doors and all of the reform around financial aid to ensure more California students are able to access this important, valuable resource. So thank you again, and we'll jump into the presentation. Thank you, Kim, Israel, and Jenny for being here and answering questions along the way. I'm happy to begin our presentation. All right, next slide, please. So our goals for today are for those of you who may not have yet started your application, to provide you an opportunity to learn more about how to begin this financial aid application process, to access those financial aid opportunities available to you at the federal and state level. And those of you who may have already completed your application or beginning to complete your application, hopefully we'll answer the questions that you may be running into, some of the more difficult scenarios or common errors that we continue to find students and families may make when completing their financial aid application. We want to be able to, again, review those sections that are may be difficult or confusing, and more importantly, get your questions answered along the way. Next slide, please. All right, so in accessing the federal and state financial aid that is available to students across California, there are two applications that a student will choose one of those two to file. The first is the FAFSA, which is the free application for federal student aid. And the second is the California Dream Act application. And those are two different applications, very similar in terms of the information that's being asked, but for different populations of students. So students and families will file one of those applications to access that aid. Next slide, please. So who can apply for FAFSA? FAFSA, again, is a federal application which allows students and families to access the federal and state aid that's available to them and be considered for those programs, those grant programs and loan programs. And students who are able to be eligible to complete the financial aid application, the FAFSA, are those that are U.S. citizens, those with a legal permanent resident who are legal permanent residents and hold a green card, certain designations, including refugees or granted asylum, and those that are T visa holders. Next slide, please. So the California Dream Act application, or CADA, as you may hear it referred to, is the application that is important in serving those students who may not meet the FAFSA criteria and are undocumented students in California. So we are very lucky that the leadership of California has allowed the state to make these resources available to our undocumented students. Those students with or without DACA are eligible to apply. Those with a TPS status or U visa holders. Next slide, please. So when it comes to filing your financial aid application, whether it's the FAFSA or California Dream Act application, the information that you're going to need specifically for parents will be the tax information for the year of 2021. So the tax filing year of 2021. And that is what we call the prior year. And so when referencing the tax information, it always will be the 2 years previous from the year that the student will enter college. So for those seniors applying for the fall semester, they would be eligible for consideration for financial aid in the 23-24 academic year. And so 2 years before that or prior to the 23 year would be the 2021 tax year. So you'll see that highlighted there with the star. And when to submit your application, you'll want to begin submitting as soon as you can or completing that application as soon as you're able to, with the March 2nd deadline, which is a priority deadline. That's very important for those students who are planning to attend a four-year university. So March 2nd is the deadline, although students can continue to apply for financial aid beyond the March 2nd deadline, specific to those students who are planning to attend a community college in the fall. So keeping those deadlines in mind, every year students will complete their FAFSA as long as or their California Dream Act application, as long as they're in college, every year beginning October 1st through the March 2nd deadline. Next slide, please. So one very important term that is common in financial aid is really understanding how much money you can receive. And one term or a couple of terms that are important for families and students to understand is the cost of attendance and the expected family contribution. And so the cost of attendance, sometimes referred to as the sticker price, is the maximum amount of money a college costs to attend for 1 year. So this is 1 year of tuition and fees. The expected family contribution is how much the student and family would be expected to contribute to their students' educational costs. And that EFC number is determined by the information that's provided on the FAFSA or California Dream Act application. Ultimately, what we see and what you'll receive is from the colleges that the student's applying for is the amount of financial need that student has. And so the cost of attendance can include all of the specific costs related to tuition, related to the fees and additional charges to cover the cost of certain services, for example, technology or lab fees. All these fees will vary from college to college. Meal plans could also be included in your cost of attendance, although colleges do have differing approaches to how they charge for those meal plans if your student is living on campus. Also, related to those cost of attendance fees are things like health insurance or health fees based on those college costs, as well as other indirect educational costs that may not necessarily be covered by the college, including textbooks, transportation, dorm, all of those personal expenses. So that can be an estimated cost ultimately for the institution or college or university that your student is attending. One important note to also be mindful of is that the expected family contribution will never change. And so this particular number is based on the student's or the family's financial situation. And regardless of what institution your student is attending, whether it's a four-year institution, an institution that has a large cost attendance like $40,000 or one that's less, that EFC number will never change. The only time that it could change is based on the family's financial situation, if it has in fact been impacted in a negative way over the course of that academic year. So most students, again, will not pay the full cost of attendance, and the cost of attendance is an important number to understand to make sure to factor in the financial aid that you're receiving. And so we wanted to make sure that you have an understanding of what those figures entail. Next slide, please. The federal aid that a student would qualify for or be considered for when submitting their financial aid application, specifically the FAFSA, are the programs associated at the federal level, such as Pell Grant, which is a very large grant opportunity for students who are eligible to qualify, up to $6,895 a year. The FSDOG grant is another opportunity that is prioritized for Pell eligible students, and that is up to $4,000. Work study is an important financial opportunity for students as well. And anytime a student is applying for their financial aid, they should always remember to mark yes, that they want to be considered for work study. That is an opportunity to earn money while they're attending college through a job that is affiliated with their campus. So this is another resource for them to access during their school year. The other opportunities that students and potentially parents would be considered for in the FAFSA are the direct subsidized loan, which are awarded up to $5,500 and based on financial need and the year that the student is in school. Direct unsubsidized loans, which can be up to $2,000, and the Direct Plus loan, which is a parent loan. So the direct subsidized and direct unsubsidized loans are both loans that would be given and awarded specifically to the student. The difference between the subsidized and unsubsidized is The subsidized loans are the interest on those loans are deferred and don't begin requiring payment on those loans until after the student graduates from their institution. And so anytime, if needed, the student needs to take out a loan, we always want to make sure that the student is only taking out the actual amount that they need, not the full maximum amount. And also ensuring that they're choosing a subsidized loan if they are eligible for that over an unsubsidized loan. Next slide, please. So in terms of state aid, all students applying through the FAFSA or California Dream Act are all going to be considered for state aid. And so that is automatically determined by the information that's provided on the FAFSA or California Dream Act application. The FAFSA and California Dream Act application have to be submitted by the March 2nd priority deadline in order to be considered for state aid. And that largest state aid program is called the Cal Grant. And some schools, just so students and parents are aware, especially private universities, may have an earlier deadline that they would like students to submit their financial aid application by. So if you are planning to apply to a private university, please make sure that you are looking at those financial aid deadlines to ensure that you are meeting those specific deadlines that individual university may be offering or may be requiring. So for UC, CSU, the March 2nd deadline is the priority deadline. But again, for privates, that can vary. So please check your campus deadlines. The exception, again, as I mentioned earlier, is for our community college bound students and foster youth who have until September 2nd to be considered for a Cal Grant. And additionally, the Chafee Grant is another opportunity for our foster youth. It is a one-time application that's in addition to your FAFSA or California Dream Act application. But that application only needs to be submitted annually, or sorry, one time rather than annually. It is a one-time application. And the state aid specifically that a student may be awarded after they submitted their financial aid application only applies to California institutions. So out-of-state colleges, those grants, those state aid scholarships, grants cannot be transferred to an out-of-state institution. The only exception, again, is for the Chafee Grant for foster youth. So that is one great thing about the Chafee Grant. Next slide, please. So our Cal Grants are, again, as I mentioned, are the largest aid that students can qualify for from and offered by our state. There are 3 Cal Grants. Cal Grant A, which will help pay for tuition and fees at a 4-year college. And the award amount does vary, as you can see, by type of college. So community college versus the CSU, UC, private, nonprofit, and private for-profit. You'll see the actual maximum award amounts based on those institutions and those systems. It does have a GPA requirement that a student must meet of a 3.0. If you must have a high school GPA of a 3.0. And for students who are applying as college students, you must have a GPA of at least a 2.4. So if you're a current college student, that GPA minimum is a 2.4. And these, the Cal Grant does require that your course of study leads directly to an associate or bachelor's degree, or qualifies you for transfer from a community college to a bachelor's degree program. The second opportunity is the Cal Grant B, which provides a living allowance of up to $1,648 in addition to tuition and fee assistance after the first year at a 2- or 4-year college. It pays most for first-year students, a living allowance only, and which may also be used to pay living expenses, books, supplies, and transportation, as well as tuition and fees. And it does require at least a 2.0 GPA and does also apply to those students interested in a technical, vocational, or career education program. So not just specific to, I'm sorry, that's the, so yes, that is another option. The Cal Grant C assists with the costs of technical or career education. It also provides up to $1,094, as you can see, at the community college level. And if you qualify, you'll receive an email or letter notification to complete an online Cal Grant C supplement in Web Grants, which is another portal that we'll mention at the end of the presentation by a particular deadline. It is available for up to 2 years. So this does support students who are entering a trade, vocational school, or certificated program. Next slide, please. So just as a point of information, it's always helpful for students and families to understand kind of where they fall and where they may fall in qualifying for the Cal Grant programs. And so you can see here by this particular slide, this shows the Cal Grant program income ceilings based on your family size. And those ceilings will help you understand what the ceiling would be for the income earned for your family. Again, the financial situation for families is varied between every family. So even though you may see a ceiling here, there may be other factors with regards to your income that may also change that ceiling and determine whether or not you meet that ceiling. For those students who are enrolled at a UC or CSU whose income exceeds the limits for Cal Grant, they will automatically be considered for another state program, which is the Middle Class Scholarship. And this is a very important opportunity for our UC and CSU bound students. Again, they must also ensure that they're completing their financial aid application by the March 2nd deadline. And the ceiling for this particular scholarship is $217,000. So that is a larger ceiling that will allow a greater number of students to qualify for this scholarship opportunity. And the award determination is based on the cost of attendance of that institution that the student is enrolling in. There are additional state programs that are offered through the state, specifically the Dream Act Service Incentive Grant, which is an opportunity for students with a Cal Grant award that meet the Cal Grant eligibility to perform some community or volunteer service. The awards can be for the Dream Act. This is for our Dream students, can be awarded up to $4,500 per academic year for their service. And so this is an important grant for our Dream students, and I just want to make sure to highlight that. We also have the Access Award for students and dependents, law enforcement personnel dependent grants, California Military Department GI Bill Award, and the Golden State Education and Training Grant Program. There is a link there for additional programs. And again, there isn't anything extra that you have to do. You just have to ensure that you're submitting your FAFSA or California Dream Act application by the March 2nd deadline. Next slide, please. So we have another opportunity in our state, which is the California College Promise Grant. And this is specific for our community college bound students. It does waive the enrollment fees, which are typically $46 per unit for our eligible California and AB 540 residents. and can also waive some of the parking permit fees at the various colleges. Students, again, applying and submitting their FAFSA or California Dream Act application will be automatically considered for the California College Promise Grant. And it's just in order to maintain their eligibility, it is important that they continue to submit their financial aid application each year. So a big opportunity there for our community college bound students. Next slide, please. And so before beginning the financial aid, FAFSA application or California Dream Act application, it's important that there are some tips that we want to make sure students and families are being mindful of to make sure that there are no issues when it comes to submitting your application and processing of your application in a timely manner. And so one important thing and one common error that we run up against when working with students is that the name that the student is using on their application does not match their legal documents. So for both students and parents, we want to make sure that you're paying close attention to this and that the name that you're entering on your financial aid application and even college applications matches your legal documents. So that can be your social security card or other sort of legal documentation that you have with your identity, and to ensure that your processing of your application is not delayed. So that does happen quite a bit. Please just verify that or have someone else look at that and make sure that there's those are matching. Usernames and passwords, making sure that you're writing down all of the different usernames, passwords, secret questions and answers when you start the process. And we'll talk about in a minute the FSA ID or the California Dream Act account. There are logins and passwords and other kinds of identifiers that you want to make sure that you're making note of. We always encourage students to take a picture of that information and save it or send it to themselves via email so that it's always in their email. Sometimes we lose our phones and we misplace them and we get new phones. So if it's not on the cloud or you don't have access to that cloud, emailing it to yourself is also another good way to save that information. Always using a personal email address. We know students, high school seniors, and are always issued a school email. That school email will no longer work once they graduate. And so it's important that you have a personal email and you're using a personal email on all of these applications so that communication you can continue to receive that communication without any delay. The PIN numbers, again, when it comes to the application for the FAFSA specifically, there is a PIN number that you will be using for you as a student and one of the parents that is used to sign your application. So keeping that information in a safe place is very important. Next slide, please. Thank you. Addresses and emails. Making sure that you're providing, again, your personal email, a mailing address that you will continue to receive mail from even when you're maybe moved away and away at college. You have a mailing address that can be used that is consistent and doesn't change. Your college email or college mailing address will change from year to year, and a phone number that will stay active and can be checked regularly. So having these points of communication be consistent is really important so that you're receiving all of the communications from the financial aid offices, from the Student Aid Commission, who is processing your financial aid application, and also your colleges. Yeah, and so again, you want to make sure that your mailing address is consistent. All right, next slide, please. And so we'll go over a few things with regards to the FAFSA specifically. Next slide. And so once you begin your FAFSA application, you're going to see this window, which will prompt you to make two choices. to complete your financial aid application as a new user or a returning user. And so if you are starting the FAFSA for the first time, you would, of course, go ahead and start and click the new to the FAFSA option. If you're a returning user, which means that you have already completed an application, you have an account, you've saved it, you want to come back and log into your application, you'll log in as a returning user. And you can take a photo of that QR code if you like, but studentaid.gov is the site that will take you to the start of the FAFSA. I haven't checked lately, but over the last couple of weeks, the great loan forgiveness program that's been going on has really been the highlighted option on this page. So just if you see that, just take a look, and if you want to type in FSA ID, that might take you there to the page that you want. But this home page has been a little bit more challenging to get to through FAFSA because it has focused on that loan forgiveness program. But the studentaid.gov is the site where that information lives. Next slide, please. So once you click that option as a new user, you're going to be taken to a page where it will allow you to actually, it will ask you if you want to create an FSA ID. And that is the first step in your application. The FSA IDs are used again to access your account and sign your completed application. It can also be used for logging into a loan or signing your loan promissory note. So it's something that will stay with you as long as you are in college. The same thing goes for your parent. If you have a parent who has already created an FSA ID because you have a sibling that is already in college, your parents should already have an FSA ID, and they will use that same FSA ID when completing your financial aid application. So again, you only need to create that FSA ID once, and the parent as well will go through the same process if they're creating a new FSA ID or a first-time FSA ID. And we just want to make sure that you also verify that FSA ID. There's two options to verify. If you are familiar with some verification processes that are very common, it will ask you to verify the process of the account through email and through your mobile phone. So don't be alarmed. That's just a normal part of the verification of the account for the FSA ID. Next slide, please. Another common question that we get with regards to the FAFSA application is, if your parent does not have a social security number, are you still eligible to apply for FAFSA? And the answer is absolutely yes. Your parent's citizenship status does not determine whether or not you are able to apply for financial aid. So they don't need a social security number. And if they don't have one, they simply enter zeros when they come to that portion. That means that they will also, for parents who do not have a social security number, they will not be able to complete an FSA ID. And they will actually, when it comes to the end of your FAFSA application and you're getting ready to sign, your parent's signature will not be done electronically. It will actually be done manually. You'll print the signature page for the FAFSA and your parent will sign. And at the end on that signature page, it actually has the address to send your signature page, your FAFSA signature page to federal student aid. So it will be processed that way manually rather than through electronically through an FSA ID. So just make sure that you get that signature page in as soon as possible to ensure that your application is not delayed and it's processed in a timely manner. Yes, just make sure that you do print that and your parent does sign it. Next slide. And here is an example of what that paper signature process looks like. So you'll come to the signature page, and the paper signature option, you'll click on the first option is sign in to print the signature page itself. You'll go to the next slide, please. And you'll see that the area where it says to print signature page, you'll print it, and then you'll see this this is a test page, but you'll see this page here with the address on the where to send your actual signature page for the FAFSA. So you'll print it and sign it and then send it off to Federal Student Aid. Next slide, please. So yes, here are there's just a couple of slides. We just wanted to make sure that for those that are submitting the California Dream Act application, that you're aware of the registration process, which ultimately will request and ask the personal information here, your name, again, making sure that it's spelled the way that it's spelled on your legal documents, your date of birth, your address, your personal email. Please, and not just for the California Dream Act application, but for your FAFSA as well, please make sure that to verify that you're writing everything or typing everything correctly, that there aren't any typos on your application, because that can cause a lot of issues for you down the line when submitting your application. So please just make sure that you're consistently checking the spellings and making sure there are no typos on your address, your email address, your home address, your date of birth even, so that it doesn't delay your application. Again, making sure you're writing down your user ID, your password, and answers to your security questions. This mirrors very similar to the FAFSA application, in that you will register and create an account for yourself using a very similar process. And at the end, there is also an ID that you'll also write down. So just keeping in mind that writing down anything that you're being given, whether it's a number, a verification, a code, whatever it is, anything that you are using to create your account or verifying your accounts, please make sure to write those things down so that you can always access your accounts quickly. Next slide. So one common question that we always get here is, can I add more than 10 schools or more? How many schools can I add when I'm submitting my financial aid application? And so the school selection portion of the application allows you to add up to 10 schools. You want to make sure that you're adding at least one California high school so that you can be considered for the Cal Grant. Even if you think you're dead set on making sure that you're going away to an out-of-state college or university, we know plans change, things change, situations change, things that come up that we never expected to happen. And we always want to make sure students have a backup plan. So always making sure that there is a California school included in your financial aid application, whether it's a California community college, a California State University, or a UC. Just please make sure to have a California college on your application. The list will actually initially only let you add 10 schools. We know that students are applying to many schools. And so you can add the first 10 schools. It doesn't have to be in any particular order, but you can add your first 10. And once you submit the application, after you've added the first 10, you can wait for about a week and then go ahead and return to your application, remove the colleges that you previously submitted, and then add any new colleges that you'd like to include. So you can add more than 10 schools by submitting waiting for a week, and then returning to the application later. Okay, next slide. So a very common situation or clarification or confusion that that can be part of the process is an important part of the process is determining whether a student is considered dependent. And for the purposes of financial aid, a student is considered automatically considered independent at the age of 24. So students who are under the age of 24 are dependent and must report parent information. It doesn't matter whether your parent doesn't claim you on their taxes any longer. It's always for the purposes of financial aid. And so unless you can answer yes to any of these questions, these are the dependency questions that will determine whether you're filing your application as a student, as a dependent student or independent student. If you are answering no to all of these questions, you will be considered dependent. If you answer yes to one of the questions, then there's a likelihood that you may be considered independent, and then it will continue to ask you additional questions based on your response to these 9 questions, I believe it is. So just read them carefully. It may look like, oh, that's not me, but just take the time to make sure that you're looking at what they're asking so that you understand the question fully and that you're ultimately responding in the way that you intend to respond. Because if for some reason you accidentally answer, no when it should have been yes, then it will take you down another path in terms of what you'll need to provide and how you'll be considered in terms of financial aid. So we just want to make sure that you're being considered in the correct way. Next slide, please. So who's my parent and when I fill out the FAFSA form? This is one of the more common areas where students and parents tend to get confused, because we know there are a lot of family situations, a lot of different family situations that may mean different things for students. And so we want to make sure that you are able to answer the questions appropriately, so that we know exactly who your parent is and which parent would be reporting their financial information as a student on your financial aid application. So we look at whether your parents are married, and if they are married, then you're reporting both parents on your FAFSA application. If they aren't married, then we look at whether they live together. And so if they're not married, but they do live together, then you're going to report both parents as well. If your parents are not married and don't live together, then you would be looking at, and we'd be evaluating whether you as a student live with one parent more than the other over the past 12 months. So looking at who are you living with and who is the parent that is supporting you more than 50% of the time, or you're living with more than 50% of the time. If that is the parent, if you're living with your father 9 months out of the year, then you would be reporting the information for the parent that you lived with more on your FAFSA form. If that's not the case, and it's evenly split, although there are 365 days out of the year, then you would report the parent who provided more financial support. So if you as a family have determined that your student is living equally amongst both parents who are not married and not living together, then you would then look at which parent is providing the greatest amount of financial support. So 51% of the financial support for the student. And then taking also into consideration, and has that parent that is providing that the greater amount of support remarried. And so if your parent has remarried, then you're providing the information for the parent that provided the greatest amount of support and their spouse. And if not, then you only are reporting for the one parent. So just, you can take a picture of this. I think we'll share this as well, but this is a little guide to kind of help students and parents understand how and who should be included in reporting the financial information on their FAFSA. Okay, next slide, please. And this is just the same infographic, just broken down. We already reviewed it, but again, you can take a snapshot if you'd like. And then we can go to the next slide. All right. And so the big question is who are my parents? If I don't have a parent that I'm living with, I'm not in that situation. I have another unique situation. Then these are, just so you know, these are not your parents. So we know that there are many situations where students are living with other relatives, siblings, friends, even other guardians, a widowed step parent. These are would not be considered your parents for the purposes of financial aid. So it is your biological parent. We are going to look first at who your biological parents are, and then go from there. Unless you have been legally adopted, then those individuals who have legally adopted you would be, in fact, considered your parent. But it has to be a court-ordered legal adoption. We know that there's a lot of custody situations where some students are living with grandparents, and but they don't necessarily have legal custody of the parent, their guardian, and they're not legally adopted, so that we still need the parents' information on the financial aid application. Okay. Next slide, please. So we know that there are many situations, family situations, where parents are living in another country. That is very common. And even if your parent is living in another country, because they are your biological parents, and they are still, you are still in contact with them. You are likely still in contact with them, but sometimes you may not be. But even if your parents are living in another country and you're here in the United States living with a family member or a friend, you are still going to have to complete the application and include your parents' information with their income and their assets. So if there is no contact, if there is absolutely no contact with your parents, then you complete as much of the information on your financial aid application as possible. And then the college financial aid office would then be contacted. You would want to reach out to them and help them understand your situation. So there is a situation, there is a common practice or option for financial aid offices that can take a special situation, evaluate it once they receive that financial aid application from a student, and determine if there is kind of an override situation where they'll be able to help bypass some of that information that's required on the application because of that special circumstance with the student. When your parents who are living in another country are reporting their financial information, you are going to convert that foreign income into US dollars. So those are the kind of main steps that we want to make sure that you're aware of if you're in that situation. Next slide. So income and asset questions can be a little confusing because you may think that there are some portions of your income you're questioning whether or not they are considered your income or even considered your assets. One common mistake that happens through the application is that the student income and parent income are confused on the application. So it's always very important that when you're going through the financial aid application, whether it's the FAFSA or the California Dream Act, that you are paying close attention to the window that you're in. It usually will be very clear at the very top which section is being completed, and it'll say student or it'll say parent. And so just make sure that you're always checking that so that you're responding to these questions appropriately as a student or the parent. The FAFSA filers can use what's called the IRS data retrieval tool. This is a newer tool that has been integrated into the financial aid application that allows the parent to automatically import their tax information into the application. This is a great time saver and ensures that your application is as accurate as possible because it's taking information directly from the IRS, and will probably lead to less questions or even maybe verification following the application submission. But please, if you're able to use this tool, I highly encourage you to do that. And as I've been kind of mentioning, I sound a little bit like a broken record. Just make sure that the information, the parent's information, the name, the address, even the home address, matches the tax filing, so that it automatically can retrieve and find and locate your tax information from the IRS and download that into your application. So just ensure that hopefully you'll have your taxes with you, and you can look and just verify that the information you're providing is matching what was included on your tax filing, so that it's able to accurately locate your file. So if you're unsure of the exact amounts of income or assets, you can always use estimates. That's perfectly fine, and that's perfectly allowable. You can update that information later if there's more accurate information that you have because you didn't have a document and you just kind of guesstimated. That's completely fine. When it asks to report the income, or not the income, but the amount of checking or savings that you have in your account, you'll just want to provide what is in your account as of the day that you're completing the application. So it's not necessarily like when you have when you've gotten paid, for at the start of the month, this is how much money I have in my account. It's just as of the date that you are completing your financial aid application. So just keep that in mind. And a common question that we get is whether my home is considered an asset or retirement account. And so those two items, that primary residence that you live in, that you pay a mortgage on, that your family is occupying, is not considered an asset and won't be counted as an asset for the purposes of financial aid, and neither will your retirement accounts. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Those will not be considered assets, and you don't have to report that on the financial aid application. Next slide, please. Your household size and number in college. This is sometimes a confusing section. You'll want to make sure that you are including only yourself as a student, and then your parents' other children or siblings, half siblings, anyone that's living with you. And even if they don't live with your parents because your parents are supporting them, and other people or dependents who receive more than half of their support from your parents. And those must live with your parents. So for example, if you have a grandparent that your parent that's living with you in your family, and your parent is supporting and providing more than half of the support to that grandparent, to that uncle, to that relative, that person would also be included. Anyone that is dependent on your parents other than your siblings. And just making sure that you are not your parent, or you're not referring specifically or to the claims, the number of those that are claimed on your taxes. So those are different from, for the purposes of financial aid. We are not necessarily looking at the number of those that are claimed on the tax forms. We're looking at the household size. Okay. And then the number of children in college should include yourself. Even if you're enrolled, if you're continuing as a student and you're enrolled at half-time in college, you still want to make sure that you're including yourself as someone who is in college, and other family members who are included in the household size. So they should be enrolled at least half-time in a program, and they would be included in that number of those that are in college. A parent is also included in that number on the FAFSA, on their FAFSA, but not the student's FAFSA. So your parent would not include themselves if they are attending college in the FAFSA application that you're completing as a student. Next slide, please. So we know there are multiple special circumstances that, and just so you know, financial aid administrators, once they receive the financial aid applications, they have the ability and authority to make adjustments for those special circumstances. And so these are some of the situations that may come up that as a student that you should be aware of, and want to make sure that you're reaching out to your financial aid office for that college that you're planning to attend, to update them on any of these types of situations that may have come up during the course of the period after you submitted your financial aid application. So please, I encourage students to reach out to their financial aid offices and keep them abreast of what is happening financially with your family if those situations, if those circumstances arise and that family's financial situation has changed. That will allow you to also be considered potentially for additional financial aid opportunities. So it's important that those are communicated. Next slide, please. Just a few other common mistakes that we want to make sure that you're looking out for and checking, that we want to make sure that you're filing the application for the correct year. So the application year will be the year that you are going to be enrolled in college. So when you submit your FAFSA or California Dream Act application, it will be for the 23-24 year. Again, the March 2nd deadline is really important. The names listed and correctly and are matching the legal documents, making sure that you're responding to all the questions and not skipping any questions. So I highly encourage students and parents, even if you have the option to skip questions, sometimes it will ask you, do you want to skip, questions so-and-so? Say no and respond to those questions. It's important that all the questions are answered as much as possible. Making sure that the applications are signed by the students, or I'm sorry, by the student, but by the parents, more importantly. Saving the application, but it isn't submitted. So making sure that you are actually submitting the application and not just saving it. Sometimes students think that they're submitting the application when they may just be saving that. So you're going to get a confirmation once you submit that, and you'll see the actual confirmation page once your application is submitted. Again, sending in that paper signature page and not delaying on that, and sending it in as soon as possible. And there are times where there are errors on the application that may need to be followed up on. So paying close attention to that, checking emails, and following up with any sort of errors that may have happened or communications that you're getting for from financial aid offices or even the Student Aid Commission. Next slide, please. So one important program that we mentioned early on is the Chafee Grant and other programs for foster youth that we wanted to make sure to share with all of you. Next slide. So the Chafee Grant, again, is specific for our foster youth population. It pays up to $5,000 annually and will help students in paying for college or a career, technical, or vocational program. This is specific for students who have lived in the foster care system for at least one day between the ages of 16 and 18. Students can participate for 5 years and receive the award through the age of 25. So it's a very important program for our foster youth. Eligible students, again, this is a one-time application that needs to be filed only once. And it is a federal and state funded grant that can be subject to annual availability of funds. Next slide, please. The Chafee Grant and the Access Award, again, this is another opportunity for current and former foster youth who can receive an additional Cal Grant Access Award of up to $6,000. So with the Chafee and the Access Award, you're looking at about $11,000 potentially. And it's not bound to traditional financial aid constraints. And it's the only state award payable at qualifying out-of-state colleges. So again, this is an award that can be transferred to out-of-state. And there are specific institutions that grant will be able to be used for. And it may be used for expenses beyond undergraduate tuition and supplies, such as rent, housing, transportation, childcare, postgraduate studies, and teacher certifications. And this actually highlights the information that is not required. So there is no GPA requirement. You don't have to have a social security number. You don't have to meet the March 2nd deadline. So a lot of flexibility with the Access Award and the Chafee Grant. Next slide, please. And again, the Chafee application process. So we want to make sure that you're submitting either the FAFSA or the California Dream Act application, the Chafee application, which is only submitted once, and then the foster youth status. So making sure that we get that verification of from the Social Security office, that foster youth status information, which is verified after submitting the financial aid and Chafee application. Next slide, please. So some final helpful tips. Completing your application as soon as possible. Again, we want to make sure that students are able to access all of the financial aid that they're eligible for, and the sooner that you submit your application, the earlier you'll know what kind of financial aid you qualify for, but also making sure that you're still eligible to receive all of the aid that's available. Applying for financial aid regardless of income. So we want to encourage students and families that even if you think that you meet those ceilings that I shared with you early on in the presentation, we want students and families to complete the application so that they can be considered for all other types of financial aid. There's financial aid that is available through their colleges and universities. Those colleges and universities will have that information and consider students for those, as well as other outside private entities may also require students to submit the financial aid application, even if they don't qualify for it, any financial aid. It can be a requirement for many of the programs, even if the student doesn't qualify for that aid, but you also may have options available to you that you weren't aware of. So please do submit that financial aid application regardless of your income. Following the filing of your financial aid application, once that application is submitted, you're going to want to create a web grants account. And that is a portal, a state portal that will allow the student to manage the state aid and learn specifically what they qualify for. So you'll be able to log into this portal, see what Cal grants you qualify for, or other scholarship or grants, California grant programs, and also manage the eligibility. So making sure that you're verifying information via the the web grants portal, and just, once you submit your application, you can wait approximately a week and then create that web grants account to check your Cal grant status. Checking your email on a regular basis, making sure you check your junk and spam folder so that you're not missing anything. Please don't be afraid to ask for help. Your counselors are great resources. Your college financial aid offices, the California Student Aid Commission, our program as well, the San Jose CalSOAP program, is also available to answer any questions as you're going through this process. And we want to be able to make sure that you are accessing the support that's available. So that link here will allow you to look at all of the webinars or workshops that are available for you to receive assistance. Next slide, please. And for our region in Santa Clara County, our CalSOAP program, our San Jose CalSOAP program, does provide assistance and works specifically with schools and districts in our area to support students and families through our Cash for College workshops. If you want to link or access that QR code, you can look and see where the next workshop will be hosted and attend that workshop for any assistance that you might need. And you can always feel free to reach out to us via email or phone, which is listed at the end of this presentation. Next slide, please. You can feel free to check out the CSAC resources that are available. There's lots of information on all of the programs that we just covered this evening, as well as accessing the California Dream Act application and the web grants account, which is one of those follow-up actions that we want students to take after they've submitted their financial aid application. Next slide, please. And be sure to follow us on social media. We have an Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok account. This is a great way to receive reminders, get additional information, receive updates on some of the statewide webinars that are also available where you can receive assistance, and just get that information about all of the opportunities that are available for you through the financial aid options, state and federal. Next slide, please. All right. So we are ready for some questions, some Q&A. Not sure if we want to take any.
Yeah, thank you so much, Director Ramos. You did a very extensive overview of our financial aid programs, and I think a lot of good reminders. Thankfully, I think a lot of Q&A that did come in was answered via text box. Hopefully you got your questions answered by the Student Aid Commission. But if you still have any questions, we're going to leave it open for a little bit. If you have any other questions, feel free to put it in the Q&A. I did see a bunch being asked throughout the session. But if there are any more questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A function right now. She can do that. And Kim and Israel are also on hand to constantly keep asking questions as they've been doing that. So thank you for doing that. So let's see if there's, I'll give it a moment if there's any other questions, but thank you for a very extensive overview.
Thank you. And
so I do see one person has raised their hand. I don't have the ability to unmute them or anything, but staff, do you want to unmute them to see if they want to ask a question? Okay, you should be able to.
Hi, my name is Suma. I'm sorry I joined late here. I just want to know if there is a way I can listen to this session in a recording or something. That is one. Otherwise, is there a way to catch up? Because I just missed this joining late.
Yeah, no worries. A simple question is yes. This recording will be emailed out to everyone after this. So because you've come on Zoom, you've got your email. But if you have specific questions, all the contact information for the Student Aid Commission, CalSOAP is down here too. So you can always ask questions, but the recording is going to be sent out to everyone after this. So just so you know.
I see. Okay. Thank you. Just some basic, maybe one basic question, and then I'll stop. I don't want to take everybody's time here. Can I go ahead and ask?
Yeah, yes, go for it.
Okay. So one basic question is, should the student be in studying in San Jose, zone, or can it be anybody even outside San Jose, to qualify for this?
So the financial aid opportunities are available to students attending any California colleges and universities for the state state aid options, and then federal is open to any student attending any college or university across the nation.
I see. Okay. And now regarding, is there a cap for, the income, like family income, and based on that, the student becomes eligible, or how does this work?
So we did share, and you'll see in the presentation slides that are shared after, there is a Cal grant. This is for state aid. There's a Cal grant ceiling, but that is a guide, but we want to make sure that students and families are submitting their application just so that they can be, because every family's situation, financial situation is unique. And we want to make sure that they're being considered based on their own personal financial situation, but also making sure that they're able to access not only the state and federal aid options, but also private and university level opportunities that can also be accessed by submitting the FAFSA or California Dream Act application. So we encourage students, regardless of their income, and families, regardless of their income, to file the application because you can be considered for a lot more actually beyond the state aid and the federal aid.
I see. Thank you. Thank you so much.
All righty. Thank you for answering that. Do we have any other questions coming in Q&A? If not, I might let our wonderful hosts resume the rest of their evening. Thank you so much for spending some time with my constituents, letting them know about all the financial aid opportunities that are out there. And again, if you have any questions that were not answered today, please feel free to reach out to my office, Senator Wieckowski's office, or directly to Cal SOAP and the Student Aid Commission. The phone number, email are all right there. I'm sure as you're filling out the forms, and as you're going through, you might have more questions. My only one piece of advice, as someone who was there doing this process about a decade ago, wow, almost exactly a decade ago now, is don't wait until November 30th when everyone is applying and everyone is doing everything simultaneously. Try to do it November 29th. No, I'm kidding. Do it before November 29th too. So we're on hand to answer questions as you go through them, but feel free to reach out. And all our contact information is here on the slide, and the slides and exit survey will also be emailed out to everyone, including this recording. So thank you all so much. Good luck with college app season, and thank you so much for all joining us.
Thank you.